And welcome to the Grid Snaps podcast, the premier game development and design podcast. Rob Howard here with special guest, and I practiced this name a lot. It's kind of embarrassing that I worked with you and never really took the time to learn, say your last name right, but it shows the kind of person I am, I guess. So Gabriel Galaz, how are you, Gabriel?
I'm much better since you got my name right.
Good, I'm glad. It's always sort of a basic thing. And of course, I took a job, that being at Purdue, in which I have to learn, 1,000 new names every couple of months. So not good for me, because I'm, as anyone that's in my classes can probably learn, I'm not that great with names, unfortunately. And my career path has only made it so that I have to get even better and better at them. Don't know what I'm going to do. It's honestly kind of an emergency situation at this point.
Name tags, hello.
Yeah, they do have here's the thing. They used to have a thing called a photo roster. You'd log in and you would just see all the faces. And so what you could do is, and of course, year one at Purdue, which was last year for me, you do all the things, right? It's like a new job. You're diligent, and you're just looking at that photo roster, studying it, like making sure that it's right. Well, guess what? They switched online services, kind of online learning dashboards, LMSs, I guess they call them or whatever, to something called Brightspace this year. And Brightspace does not have a photo roster, or at least the students didn't put photos up on there. So I can't actually do that unless I somehow think that every single person's going to look like an empty silhouetted head when they walk in, and alas, they don't. So it's been a little tougher. And then the other thing that makes it hard, I know that my audience and you are just riveted by this stuff. Because of the COVID situation, we have de-densified classrooms, which means that if I have like 45 students in a class, not all 45 can fit in the classroom. So 20 or so will be on one day, and then the rest of them on another day, and that half has to do distance learning on the other, blah blah blah. Which means I get different sets of students in front of my face each week, right? Like, on Monday it's one set of faces, on Wednesday it's another, even further delaying the name learning process. Let's get out the small violin. How difficult my life has become. So,
Wah.
So, like, how you, of course, live in the beautiful Bay Area, where I was just recently at. How are things there? I know you've been probably inside, your domicile quite a bit until maybe the last few months or however. How has life been?
I mean, the fires down here make you keep you inside even more. So there's that.
Oh, that's right.
Nature itself made a decree.
Oh, right.
Through the element of fire.
Yes, it's not the governor this time. Nature gives a stay-at-home warning.
Exactly.
I remember that. I remember a few times in my 3.5, almost 4 years there, where you'd go outside in San Jose and it would just be like a fog that you would get for all the Indiana folks listening, and all the Purdue students. How in the fall you wake up in the early morning and there's like fog that just is from condensation. Imagine that at like 3 p.m. In the height of the afternoon, but it's not condensation, it's smoke. And that's what it looks like. That's weird. That is a weird thing.
Gives you that cool blood boon from Breath of the Wild.
That is true. And then all the monsters regenerate. Right.
Exactly.
All right. So why we have Gabriel here to kind of enlighten us in the fine art of level design is, well, first of all, some background. It was funny. We were in some ways like ships passing through the night, right? Like I was leaving Cold Iron sort of right after you started, but we had a few months together. And it was a good time, man. It was sometimes like when you're in that stage, and again, what I always tell people is that when you take a college job, you actually know way more in advance than is comfortable. That's not pleasant. I'm telling you, that's not actually fun to know that you're going to like leave a job, but it's like quite a while in advance because, you take it before the academic year starts. And so you have a period of a couple of months where you can't say anything because you would like to stay employed during that time, and so you kind of have to keep that news in for a while. And so, when you started, I already knew I was going to take the job, at Purdue.
Oh God.
And so, I had every reason to just be like, totally ignore this guy, whatever, I'm out of here. But no, and the reason why, we're friends and we keep up and all the rest of it is I thought you brought some really cool ideas with you from your level design experience. I also discovered that no one will believe this because I look incredibly old, like the guy that drinks out of the wrong chalice in the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade old. But we're like the same age, which means you've had a long, varied career that goes way back, which is also really interesting and cool. So there's a lot of reasons why having you on the show is a cool idea. So let's kind of rewind. Actually, why don't you we'll do that interview question thing, right? What brought you, that's right. I get to give you interview questions. What brought you into the industry, Gabriel? Gabe, what got you excited about being in games?
I was always into games, mostly because my parents wouldn't let me play them. Shows them. So I was always trying to figure out ways to play games. And then finally I got into college and I was playing Grand Theft Auto 3 on a buddy's PlayStation 2. And it sort of dawned on me that it was people's jobs to make these.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, oh, I wonder if I could do that. And that sort of started that whole ball rolling. Which eventually, and that ball stopped in the QA department at Activision, which that was, because I didn't know really how to get into the industry. That was around early 2000s, and there weren't accredited programs such as the one you teach that would streamline the process of getting into the industry. So it's pretty much sort of figure it out, at least as far as I knew at the time. So one of the suggestions made to me by a friend at the time was to try QA, and so I did that, and that wasn't going anywhere at Activision because being QA at a publisher, you're removed from the actual people who make the games, which are developers, right? So your publishers who actually fund the game, do the marketing, all that stuff. And then you have your developers who are actually the ones making it, right?
Right.
So I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a distinction between that.
So let me just ask a quick question there, because this is fascinating, especially for the students that I have listening and other folks. So your QA position, you were not embedded within the developer like some QA people are. You were separate. So you were with Activision, the publisher, and then Treyarch or Infinity Ward or whomever would be sending bugs to you. Is that right?
I was filthy basement trash. Literally in the basement.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, that just goes to show, there is kind of a difference there, right? Because I would imagine that if you were working, because there is a stereotype that hey, you can get your foot in the door in QA and then you can use that to blossom into what you want. And I have to imagine that's only true if you're actually rubbing elbows with developers.
That is correct.
Right.
There were some people who got out of there, but I think that was more on account of them networking, I'll call it.
Right.
It's the polite way I'll put that. I'm sure it could have expedited the process if I would have networked better.
Sir.
But that wasn't exactly my part of my personality at the time. And so after, I don't know, maybe 3 years too long of doing that job and realizing I was not being treated like a human being, which is, it's interesting because I look back at it now and it's basically that QA department at that time just felt like lost souls looking for the path out.
Right.
And I was definitely one of those, but it was I wanted to get into games, I just didn't know how. And so I quit that job and actually, segue into the topic of working in a developer as QA, which at the time was Insomniac Games. I found out they were literally around the corner from the apartment I lived at in Burbank.
What a step up, right? I mean, this goes to
Yeah.
show how careers can be, night and day. Here you were at a position that, your foot was in the door. It was definitely progress. Like if I had a student that was like, "Hey, I got a QA job at a major publisher," I would not sneer at it. But for you, it may have been a dead end. But bam, you found an opportunity, and I mean, wow,
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think the good thing about Activision working there was that it made me not like it enough to leave it. And that's not to say it was like it was, it was partly me too. I was like pretty immature and just, I didn't know what was going on, man. So it was definitely like, I was in no position at that time, just mentally as a human being, to like have the capacity to like progress out of there on my own accord. I need to like learn how to be a professional, you know what I mean?
right.
And so I think Insomniac was the appropriate place that could nurture that type of behavior if you wanted to be a professional and and you had aspirations. Because once again, you're working in a developer, the people who are actually making the game. So you get
Right.
like hands-on learning, you get to like interact with the people who are making the game, obviously, but in a way that you can learn if you are so inclined to do so.
Right.
Right. So that's pretty much what I did. Was just sort of, I sort of like took, not mental stock. I sort of like just observed, how things were, and I was like, okay, how do I make an impression?
Right.
Because this is, I can say this because I was QA, but QA guys tend to try to get noticed, no matter what they like, through obnoxious means, through whatever they can, because they just want to get out. They want to, they want to do something else. And that's not great because that means we have a stereotype assigned to us as QAs. Like, these guys are just trying to like, look how cool I am. Please notice me so you can give me an opportunity to get out of here. Right. So I sort of leverage that with like, okay, you know what? If I want to get out of here, I need to make an impression. And the only way to do that is to appear as though I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
As a QA, as a person in QA, because obviously I wasn't. I was just a QA, I was just a person in QA. So I just, made it a point to learn as much as I could in terms of design, because we had, obviously when you're there as a developer, you have a computer and your computer has access to all the files on the network.
Right.
That includes design docs and things like that. So I just sort of like, that's how I learned everything. So when there were opportunities for me to provide suggestions, when they'd question us, when they'd ask us, because designers are always asking for feedback from people who are playing the game the most. And that's
absolutely
QA.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And so when opportunities arose, I made sure to only speak up when I had something that was, in my head at least, that would be significant enough to not only be noticed, but ideally improve the game in a way that was possible, right? Because you can say like, we're making Ratchet and Clank and Insomniac, like, oh, what should we do here? Like, oh man, let's turn it into a first-person shooter. That's not
right.
gonna fly, right?
Yeah. And you're hitting on something that I want to emphasize, right? Because it sounds like, and we both know this, that one of the huge challenges of our job is getting good feedback. So it sounds like you used your ability to be the giver of that feedback to make an impression, because, it is rare as a designer to get useful feedback. So that kind of begs the question, for a designer, what is good feedback versus bad feedback?
This is going to sound obnoxious. I don't care. If you're a good designer, all feedback is useful, because for the most part, because when you're looking at it, if someone says they hated something, you can usually distill it down as to the essence of it. Like, oh, I hated this map because like, and then they can give like a couple, basic reasons that may not be critical constructive feedback, but you can sort of like key in on what they really didn't like. You know what I mean? So I think it's a, you can't be reactive as a designer, right? If you get bad feedback, you can't just be like, ugh, I'm not listening to this person ever again. You have to like really like think about where they're coming from. I mean, obviously you can ask more, but some people are not equipped to provide you with that information because they just don't understand how to break something down.
Right. Right.
So,
and that's one of the things that I noticed when we worked together that made quite an impression on me is that, and especially hearing that, I think you learned a lot of your skills on the job through kind of example by observance, which is very impressive. To be able to do that, you came in to that situation that we're in working together with a tremendous desire to codify our methods of collecting feedback, including doing it in a very data-driven, I'll even say psychometric way. You introduced ideas like, hey, we should have surveys with questions with a 1 to 5 scale, and we should be kind of getting that data so we can then move the needle. Okay, so this is something that, yes, have I collected feedback at other companies? Yes. Have we had play tests? Yes. Have we tried to go about it so scientifically before? No, not really. So is that something you picked up from one of the developers you worked for, this sort of scientific method of, hey, let's get good data, let's then try to alter that data to make a level more fun?
yes. So the original place I got that from was LucasArts. We had a woman there named Celia Hodent. She, I'm not sure where she came from. She had like a doctorate in something. She's like legit, super smart woman. And she came in there to LucasArts, and this was like 2010s. And she came in there with like these crazy radical ideas I had never considered, like focus tests and these very like specific surveys. And she was all about UX UI, right? And this is all news to me. And I think it was news and new to a lot of people there at the company because she really wasn't. Her procedures were and methods were as accepted. There's a lot of pushback, it seemed like, from everyone else for whatever reason. But I just think it was just because like people didn't understand how important UX and UI was. Because she, after LucasArts shut down, she went to Epic Games, and she was the UX director on Fortnite. And that, say what you will about the UX and UI in that game, but it's really, really good. It's really good. And like, so she was responsible for like the playtest surveys and things like that at LucasArts, and those were super useful. And then when I went to Sledge, they had that as well, and those are super useful because you can literally see like the progress, right? So you can find, of course, subjective, but if everyone's saying something is fun, then it's like, okay, this might be fun.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's as they say in academia, qualitative, but if you get really strong evidence that's qualitative, it's still strong, and it's certainly better than shooting in the dark, or, because I find, when I compare what you're trying to implement to like kind of how play tests and stuff have worked in the past at every employer that I've had, there's sort of a weird reading of tea leaves effect that when you don't do that, that's what you end up getting, right? You gather everyone, they play the thing, there might be a questionnaire, there might be a roundtable, something, but since there isn't numbers being recorded or something like that, you're really just left with the vibe. What's the vibe of the room? And of course, like really sharp people can pick up on how people are feeling, but it's not always easy to do that. Some people will play something and have a great time and act totally angry while they're having a great time because that's kind of their personality, so you can't really trust that. And I really just love having that independent metric. I mean, it's going to influence research activities I do, in my new job, because I want to pursue questions on things that I'm working on in that manner. So it's very influential on me. Could you think of a time either at LucasArts or or Sledgehammer, where you had a map that maybe was getting 3s or heaven forbid 2s, but you were able to like use that feedback and push it on up through the scale?
All the time.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's great. Yeah.
I think there was like one map I had at Sledgehammer that was right out of the gate. It was like an amazing map. And I mean, it went down because like for trying to do some other changes to try out some new things that didn't work out so well, and then it was like, oh, the plane had a perfect takeoff, and then it started to nosedive. Like, oh, pull back.
All right.
But I mean, yeah, definitely, of course. I want to go back to what you were talking about earlier about feeling that vibe, reading the tea leaves is one of the worst things as a level designer or any designer is if the company is playing your feature and it's dead silent.
Yes, and I know how that feels. Yeah.
And you can feel it in the room. Like people are just not saying anything because they don't want to be rude.
Right.
But
yeah.
They hate it.
The one time I can remember where that happened to me was on like the very first game I was working on, Insect Armageddon. There's these gunship sequences, and they're in the final game. They're really cool. I'm actually very proud of them. But, the first time that the prototype version of that I played was debuted, like, if you play the final game, it's like you're, the gunship that you're on it's diving and weaving and doing cool patterns, and you're, like, mowing down the mutant ants, and it's really, there's, like, explosions. The first prototype I had, it was, like, I was using, like, a giant lampshade-looking model thing that was just in the engine, right? And I just attach the player character to it, just a crude attach operation, and so it's just your player character attached to this huge floating lampshade lerping in a straight line, like no anim, just a lerp going across. And in my head I could see where it was going, right? Like I could see, like I was doing it to get to the cool cinematic scoops and dives, but like it's a prototype, and it was just brought out like, you and I both believe very strongly in allowing the dev team to squint, of course. Like, let's show the white box stuff. Let's not hide it. But that probably was too early, because then, everyone in that session was just like, this is the stupidest thing I've seen in my life. What is this? You're attached to a giant lampshade. You're just shooting down at a static scene. Fortunately, the right people, and I interviewed one of these folks earlier this summer, Wayne Harvey, the chief technical officer of Vicious Cycle. They knew what I was going for, and so they hey, look, let's get this guy some support, let's get him some animators helping him, and then it became cool. But that was the one experience I can think back where people were just, the vibe was awful,
Mm-hmm. But it's like, I think there's value in those, in even doing it that rough,
right?
Because people need to get used to it.
Yeah.
You can only iterate if you can only iterate well if you can iterate fast.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to fail fast. And studio cultures where they don't allow that, that's not good.
Those are great pull quotes. If I'm not lazy and I actually sit and try to make some pull quotes for this podcast, I would pull those quotes out in particular. Of course, I agree. It's one of those great challenges in game dev, right? Because that does not come naturally to people at all. Like, they are unduly influenced by the final art. It's why in my classes right now we're in week 2, so they're all white boxing stuff, right? And I'm like, no art from the asset store, art that you make, nothing. I want you to use cubes. I want you to use BSP, because I don't want, I want you thinking about the gameplay and iterating on the gameplay and not making something that looks pretty and then you think it plays good because it looks good. And then, what ends up happening is, you play the thing 20 or 30 times, and all of a sudden you start realizing it plays badly, but you've done all this work, putting in final art,
Yep, that's so reassuring to hear that the youths are in good hands.
Oh, you're too kind.
Well, it's like, I mean, because you should, like, even the example you used about that lampshade thing, right? Like, you should be able, as soon as you play something fun, you just feel it. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what it looks like. You just feel it, and you can feel where it's going to go. Like, if there's a good concept there, you'll know it as soon as no matter what it looks like. And it's like for multiplayer games, right? Like, you can put all for a game such as Call of Duty, all the art sort of washes over you anyways, because that's not what you're looking at, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
it's a complementary, all the art and the effects and all that stuff, but really what you're trying to do is just shoot someone else. That's the most important thing. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that brings me to this. I am right now in my classes having my students do multiplayer deathmatch maps using like the the Unreal shooter game template. It's a very, very bare bones, which is actually good because it kind of focuses them in. Like, you get two weapons. You get an assault rifle, and you get this weird weapon that's kind of like a rocket launcher, but it's honestly, it's got splash damage or whatever. You have bots. That's the big reason why I have them use it, is they have bots, and that, they can. Of course, humans are 1,000 times better, but at least they have the bot support. There's a decent amount of art to when they get to that point, they have it. So, what would be your fundamentals of multiplayer sort of level design?
Well, I mean, just from what I'm hearing, what you're talking about right now would be set it up so they can play against each other.
Yeah.
like every day, at
Right.
least once a day.
Yeah.
So, like, even if you have fun, like, let's just say you have good systems already.
Right.
And you just build something simple like a cube.
Right.
Yeah, those guys need to be able to play, because you only get so much data from playing against bots, because that's
right.
So I mean, like at LucasArts, at Sledgehammer, basically every multiplayer game we've worked on playtests every single day,
right.
because you need to know if that works. So for me, at least, that's the most fundamental thing.
I'm feeling some future curriculum tweaks bubbling up in my head. That's good. It's always good. Very good, very good. And so one of the things I try to tell them, and the thing is, like, and this is why I'm glad to have you on, my career has been sort of odd in that, I guess it's not odd, it's just a different direction. Like, a lot of my professional stuff has been single player, right? And I always would do multiplayer stuff on the side to try to keep those chops up, just in case one of those companies want to hire me. And so there's always this, like, feeling of like I'm maybe a little bit behind the 8 ball here. So I'm glad to have you here to pick your brain on this. So in my experience, like, a mistake students make a lot is getting too fixated on the geometry, and then there's not a good flow. You're running through the map, you're getting caught up on things, you're placing too many objects in the world. Is that something that you've noticed?
Naughty. All right, kids, listen up here. So there's a way you do at the end of, usually at the end of a map, when it's gone through art and it's ready for ship, you do what's called the hug test, which is you don't want to get snagged on anything at all, unless it's like a piece of geometry that's like obviously there, like a car or something bigger, like a piece of cover. That's the only stuff you want to get stuck on, because you never want the player to get in a fight where they're backing up or trying to do some like movement and they get stuck on something and they can't really tell what it is, they don't know what it is. That is like that's 10 Commandments sin type of business, right?
More curriculum tweaks bubbling. This is good because of course I've told them this, but I can see we can go deeper, right? We can do better in getting their multiplayer maps really tight in this area, by even making that part of the rubric, right? We have a grading rubric. You got to have these things and this things, and I can definitely see adding the hug test as an actual thing that we do. So that's really cool.
It's painful to do it, but it's 100% necessary, because like one of the most important things about a multiplayer map is predictability, right? Like, if I turn a corner, I need to, like, if I play this map X amount of times, hundreds of times, I know it's going to be around that corner, right? And therefore, because I already know what situation I'm getting into, I know where threats are going to be, and given my loadout at that current point in time, I know how to react in a situation that I'm entering, right? And if there's too much complexity, then I can't manage all those decisions I need to make. Like
Right.
predictability is super duper important
Right.
for multiplayer maps. And so that fits into like the hug testing, right? If I'm backing up
Yeah.
and in my mind I know what's behind me
Right.
because the map is not super complex, I know where I can, like, you know, where I need to go to get safety or whatever you need to do.
Right. Right.
But if there's stuff that you're getting snagged on, now you're like, I hate this game. The one thing you need to make sure is that players don't say, I hate this game because it, you know, cheated me out of this situation.
Right. Right.
But back to what you're saying, like some of the fundamentals for designing a map, I think like the biggest ones are, I don't know what other people call this, like, but I know what I call it. It's like a combat premise. So if I have a multiplayer map, let's just say everyone knows Rust from Modern Warfare 2. But if nobody does, I'll go ahead and explain it. It's basically a big square. There's a large structure in the center that's like 3 or 4 stories tall. You can get all the way to the top of it. And around the edges of the map is basically places you can take cover. Now, when I say combat premise, when you enter that map, you know, like, okay, I'm safe in the outer edges, right? And that's where I can shoot at guys that are on that central tower. And then, you know, if you want to get, you know, good visibility of the entire map and control of that entire map, you go up to the top of that thing in the center. Like that's like once you enter that level, it takes, I don't know, however, it doesn't take very long to understand how the fights are going to play out.
Right.
I think that's the most important thing for a map, is to play it like a few times and you know how the overall battle is going to take place. Right. Like if it's, let's just do this for an example. Let's say we make a square map. Both halves of the map, let's say the north and south side, are just 2 bunkers. But in the middle is a ditch that has no cover, it goes down, and then it goes back up into the other team's base.
Like
right?
a blood gulch or something, yeah. You
just, you know, okay, we take cover here, and if we want to get those, you know, if we want to push those guys out of their cover, we got to go into this no man's land, fight our way up this hill, jump in there, clear them all out, and now spawns flip, right? Like it's a very simple concept to understand. But that's part of that predictability you need so that players can make good, fun choices. And then go ahead.
No, please continue.
I think like the second part of that is probably fantasy fulfillment. When you make a map, right, you don't want to do someplace generic. Generally, you want to do something that is like you look forward to playing, right? Like just off the top of my head, I thought of a battleship from World War II from Call of Duty, right? Like, oh, that's cool, right? I've never fought a battleship before, like, and we could take like a, I don't know, what's a multiplayer map from like a sci-fi game that you can think of?
Well, when you say that, like, fantasy fulfillment, this is a cool place to be, I think of that Halo, which the kids now call Halo CE now. There's that map where it's a starship cut in half.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's just really awesome, you know?
Think if you're a tourist and you want to like go somewhere cool that looks cool, and you're a nerdy tourist. You're like, I want to go fight on an alien spaceship, right? Or I want to go fight in, I don't know, a clone factory or something like that. You know what I mean? Like something cool.
You know what I love about this is you know, I think the stereotype is to think, well, you know, all this world building and storytelling, all that's single player stuff. We don't worry about the multiplayer. It's just about giving a cool shooting arena. I love this notion of the tourism because it kind of allows you to flex some of that narrative creative muscle that at least I would normally think you would focus on in single player, but in a multiplayer setting. And now that you mention it, yes, it makes total sense to me. And it's very rare that a map doesn't have that and is still really awesome. And of course, the one I can think of that is kind of like this because it's so abstract is Hang 'em High from Halo 1, right? That you know, it's Covenant architecture, but it's also kind of amorphous as to what is that thing? I don't know, but it's a cool map of good gameplay, so you don't care. But I have a stronger image in my head of Blood Gulch because it's a cool layout, but the the ship torn in half is a lot of fun to be in because so you're absolutely right that I always go back to the Call of Duty 4 map with the burning wreckage of the helicopter, in the
Crash.
middle. Yeah, that one's a lot of fun. So yeah, I think designers absolutely can think a little bit about the world design, give you an interesting place, to play in.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing you just those examples you just gave are interesting in the sense that I think fun always is paramount,
Right.
right? So if there's something that doesn't really make sense but it's fun, then just go with it.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
if it's fun, like the fun part that's the hardest part to get, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I think
We have a wild
uh,
Kip Carbone appears.
A new challenger has entered the ring.
Just in time. We're having a great conversation about, actually, incredible conversation about multiplayer game design.
incredible.
Yeah, no, seriously. Like, I'm not actually kidding. I am going to have my students listen to this as a required thing. Because there's been so many.
I feel so cool.
There's so many nuggets in here that are actually going to help them because they are doing this like right now, right? So this will be really helpful and useful. And one of the things you always worry about, they're going to skip this part, me just flapping my lips. But like, one of the things I always worry about now that I'm an educator is, am I getting stale? Am I just repeating the same thing? So getting this fresh line of thinking is enormously valuable.
Anybody?
Yes, I hear you, Kip. You are coming through good.
No, it's the Ben Stein.
Oh, right. Yes, Ferris Bueller Days Off. By the way, you have to understand, Kip,
Bueller.
my students, to mention Ferris Bueller's Day Off is like mentioning that silent movie where the guy gets shot into the moon or something to us. Like, I'm always doing that in my classes. I'm making like a Ghostbusters reference, and it's like someone referencing Casablanca to us. Like it's disturbing and a little sad.
That is sad. Jeez.
Sorry to be depressing.
So back to what I was talking about earlier with the fun factor is that, I mean, we still think the priority should be given to building a believable space and believable architecture. That should be a priority. But once again, fun trumps everything. So if you find something fun that doesn't make sense architecturally or fit in the world, just gotta see if you can make it work because that's more important.
So Kip Carbone, this is a perfect way to get you into the conversation, get you warmed up here. So Gabe was just talking about, hey, it's great to have a believable space, but if there's something fun but it doesn't make architectural sense, so be it. Let's roll with it. How do you, as an art director and an environment artist, handle that? A designer hands you something that's undeniably fun, but it doesn't actually make a lot of sense visually or architecturally. How do you try to solve that problem from your perspective as an artist?
I think, I mean, anything that's in a game, you sort of gamified, right? It's not exactly real world spec. So there, I mean, even though it may appear that way and something might feel better once you gamify it, and you might feel that it's more real, like, oh wow, this feels great, but it's like 6 times the size it should be or something. There's different ways that you kind of add bits of familiarity that the player will pick up on and kind of ground you. Oh, okay, in that actual reality or whatever you're going for. It may be a fantasy crazy thing with space mohawks and purple crystals or something, but for me, I like to, if it is like Gabe mentioned, if it is fun, that's kind of the overall thing. But if it, I think bringing in some more realistic elements to it or something that kind of grounds it in reality, making sense of it. It's like sci-fi, the good sci-fi. It's sort of grounded in some sort of functionality. Like, oh, okay, I don't know how that, but it sort of looks like it functions as, some sort of hyperdrive or something. It's like that. And you could apply that to architecture, anything like that, right?
So it sounds like your philosophy is not to be like, you know what, Gabe or Rob, or name your favorite designer or least favorite designer. This doesn't make any sense. I'm going
That's
to
a short list from my favorite designers.
I'm
Just
going
kidding.
to I'm going to just throw a big fit here because it doesn't make visual sense, and it's my job. Instead, it sounds like you're saying, "Hey, I'm going to try to make this work. I'm going to try to find a way to take this, not actually change it from a gameplay perspective, but I'm going to, maybe this is the wrong word to use, but trick the player into believing that it's believable, right? I'm going to do visual trickery to make it seem realistic whilst keeping the designer's original vision." Am I on the right track here, Kip, as to your philosophy?
Yes. Yeah, and again, there's like a collaboration that happens, right? Where at that point I may get in there and I might say, hey, guess what? If we do this, it might actually make it play better and make it more realistic, or make it more like, say if we're making, I'll give like a good example of this, like a spaceship. Okay, this is a very generic thing, but you might get a comment like, oh, that's way too big for a spaceship. You could never have enough metal for that spaceship on, Earth or something. That actually came up once.
What?
Oh my gosh.
And we're, if you could believe it or not. So, I mean, that's like the extreme, right? But, like you might see the outside of a spaceship and there might be windows or something, but you go into a room, or like there might be windows that go to the exterior of the ship or something, or you may be going through a room and then you might think like, well, it'd be cool to put in a window here, but that's not reflective on the outside, or or vice versa or something. But does that make sense? Not really.
Yeah,
Sort of.
no, it did, because there's this thing of
Willing suspension of disbelief.
yes, yeah. Sometimes people get hung up on the real world a bit too much, I think, and you have to. We're always gamifying, to some degree, and if everything is in harmony, the player will join you. They will, they'll buy it. They'll buy what you're selling.
I'll equate this to Michelangelo's David, the David.
We're
When you
highbrow
see, like
now.
his
Yeah.
hands and his feet are like gigantic. But if you stand at the base of him, the statue, it looks like it's in perspective and it looks right. But obviously, no, it's not. It's disproportionate. That same sort of thing, that principle of that, like you're depicting it. You're using in the medium you're using to depict your art. You're accentuating it and making it read better and convey whatever you're trying to convey.
I'm going to
better.
look at that statue again. Unfortunately, not in person. That's not allowed right now. But, but can't go to Italy right now.
American, baby, we do what we want.
But no, that's really fascinating. I never knew that, Kip Carbone.
If you look at the
yeah.
Pieta again, Mary's lap is like 60 times the size of a normal lap, where she has Jesus on her.
I was there in person and never noticed that. And
Really?
yeah,
Take a look. I mean, it's like, whoa.
Wow.
Whoa.
Very cool, very fascinating.
Mamma mia! Like you'll. It's okay if I say that. If it's offensive if you say it wrong.
Well, you're Italian. You're allowed. So
that's why.
So Gabe, getting back to kind of the fundamentals of multiplayer level design, let me ask you this. So you've been involved in level design as long as I have. What are some have things changed about good design practices, or have they stayed the same as the years have gone by?
Yeah, I think they've gotten. Seems like they've gone from, well, I'm trying to think of like really good multiplayer games right now that aren't battle royale. Because there's with a more confined experience like Call of Duty, right, or Gears of War, map design is much more structured to be a very controlled experience. Right. Like we do these things in level design where it's like I enter a space and you do what is called threat assessment, right? You look at all the places where a person should be. You make ideal ideal locations for players to be, players being enemies, right? And that's what creates like an interesting fight, right? Because they're in a position of power or perceived power, and you need to know, where those are, right? But those need to be. There can't be too many of them, because then you start getting overwhelmed with choices, right? And that creates like a overwhelming experience. So the more you manage those threats in terms of level design, the much more of a palatable experience it is for a player. Right now, when you're in like a huge, gigantic map that guys can shoot you from anywhere, it becomes way more frustrating, like overwhelming. If you're by yourself, right? If you're with a team, it's a little bit more manageable. But so what I'm getting at basically is like it depends on the game, right? So like for a Modern Warfare or Call of Duty game, I think the level design has gotten a lot more refined. It's not so like loosey-goosey. But that also fits with like the way that game is supposed to play, right? So I think level design has gotten better in terms of architecture and like believability of spaces, for sure. But also, yeah, like I said earlier, like a little bit more refined in terms of like a streamlined experience, if you will.
It's funny you bring up battle royales, right? And I've been lamenting this actually all semester, because like in a lot of ways the battle royale subverts, totally throws away some of the things, and I think it is because of that structure that you mentioned, how controlled the experience has to be in a typical multiplayer game. Now all of a sudden you have a map that's freaking gigantic. One of the things I would take off a lot of points for in a multiplayer map would be, hey, you're taking way too long to get me to the action. You have all this dead space. And that's what Battle Royale is. Lots of dead space to get to the action, because that works for that game design. I mean, that's the lesson there. There's a game design there that you're making the level for. Yep. And I'm just kind of waiting. I mean, yes, Fortnite is like the most popular thing since sliced bread. There's other battle royales that are popular, but I still feel like, especially teaching students new to this, that teaching them simple, just like 4v4, 8v8 deathmatch is a good starting point. I feel like if I'm like, you can design a battle royale map to begin, there's too many things you're balancing, right? It's like learning to run before you've learned to walk. Do you agree with that, Gabe?
Yeah, because I think you have to make the controlled experience first. Right. Like you need to understand. I mean, it's all the things we talked about earlier, right? You can put those into practice better on a smaller map, right? Because it's more of a controlled experience. You are explicitly saying when you build something, like you are going to do these actions here, here, and here, right? You're laying it all out. And there's less of that with a larger map, simply because players have more freedom, right? You're restricting freedom on a smaller map, but at the same time, you're doing it with the intent of getting the player to have an experience you want that is more by your design.
Right.
So I think that's really important.
Right. So Kip, let me ask you this then. I'll ask the same question that I asked Gabe actually. So you've been adjacent to design your entire career, right? Environment art, level designers. Hopefully it's like peanut butter and jelly. Hopefully it's not like
peanut butter and onions.
Yeah. Yes.
Unless you're Fred Savage from Little Monsters.
Yes. So what have you noticed in terms of how level design has changed from your perspective, right? Going back to like working on Splatterhouse for Namco all the way to now.
I mean, I think one thing that we've done, I mean, I guess for myself, I don't know if it's, I definitely agree with Gabe that there's more. Can I call you Gabe? Is it?
Whatever you want, baby. Whatever you want.
Okay. I don't think we've ever actually met. This is the first time we're having this deep, intimate conversation, which is great. What were we talking about? Design.
How design has changed over the years, yes.
Yeah, so I think there's been more structure to it. I think certainly early on it was sort of like nobody knows this magic sauce of what makes this fun. And in my career I was always like, well, why does this level play better than that level? Why is this more fun? And I didn't know really, and I don't even think the people, the designers I was working with even knew, but that started the ball rolling on me investigating more because it made my art look better and it made everything better. So I'm like, well, this is certainly better if we do more of this. Let's start to figure this out. And I think it's been one area that I've tried to grow as an artist, and just maybe the understanding and the reasoning behind it, maybe not the implementation. That obviously that's the design, it's a whole discipline and profession. But I hope that it's gotten to be more of a or more refined, and it's actually like there's like rule sets, and or I guess it's more of like a. What were you gonna say?
Oh no, I was just thinking right now is I remember starting at Sledgehammer Games thinking like, yeah, I kind of know what's up with level design. And I was like, I'm an idiot, dude. Like, holy shit. Like, these guys are so much better than me. Like, oh my God. But it wasn't like, it was once I understood how they built maps, but that wasn't like how they didn't, Sledgehammer Games themselves did discover how to make good maps. That was like handed down from like Treyarch. Treyarch was the one who figured out, and like Infinity Ward, right? They like really figured that out. And once I got that knowledge, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I looked at every other game and I was like amateurs. like it was just like so when you ask about like how's level design changed, it's just fundamentally gotten better, like across the board.
I think we've really hit on something big because one of the things that I think Kip caused us to hit it off really well when we started working together is I could tell that you weren't actually used to having designers justify their decisions some kind of logical way, right? Like even if you didn't, even if you didn't agree, even if you didn't agree with it, like it is and I've fought against this. I can tell Gabe you've fought against this, and I try to. I'm teaching this stuff now, so I have to. But for too long, design was instinct, right? Seat of the pants. I'm pretty good with the computer, so I'm sitting down in front of the editor, and I kind of make until it feels good. And you can blunder into fun that way, but then you can't recreate that fun because it was blundered into. So kind of.
Well, I think you can't do it predictably, right? Like you can't. I mean, like you're not like it. I mean, I'm like a commercial artist, right? So like I get thrown at all sorts of different stuff, but I have a set of tools I use and I default to, and I know, I mean, not everything I'm going to make is like this like virtuous masterpiece, but I can do pretty well on everything, right? Like I do. And so it's like the same thing applies to design, I would assume. I know. And I think it kind of kills me when people are just like, they think it's like this, I don't know, like they're a magician or like wizard or something, and they've got this cauldron, and they're like, oh, we're mixing up this potion. You don't know quite what it is. Like they're like an alchemist or something trying to make, there's like very predictable rules and stuff you could follow to get something pretty good. Now there is a bit of spontaneity and an element that you need to play test, obviously, and test things out, and then you could kind of enhance it. It's like if you're a chef, you know what the recipe is. You obviously have to taste it, and maybe the vegetable you got or something isn't the best, so you can enhance it. There's like a little bit of
right. We're definitely
improv in there.
Yeah, we're definitely not trying to say that level design and game design more broadly is purely a science, right? Get out the tape measure and like, well, you put the blocker 10 units here, and no, it is definitely not that. There's always going to be some element of magic to it, but you can have guideposts and sort of rules and best practices that will help you get to the inspiration faster. I've always believed that. And Gabe, what I find really cool, because I didn't actually, I think, know this about you until this conversation, is I had the benefit of going deep into student debt to learn these things from cool people at SMU Guildhall, right? You managed to get this like stuff on the job by being around people that were awesome at it. what a gift. That's extraordinary. What a cool career path that is, I just have to say.
Yeah, it's basically sink or swim is how
yeah,
how I did it.
yeah.
It's the best way sometimes, most of the time.
But
So
if you're,
I gotta go.
yeah, I was just gonna say, if you're a student listening to this, and I'm gonna make you listen to it, like, so you are listening to it, don't get bummed that that Gabe didn't have to like sink all this money into his education, because I do think times have changed now. I think the bar to get in is such that you are in the right place, learning this in a formal way. I think there'll always be room for that organic career path also, but like, you know, the fact that we're having this conversation and we're breaking down these best practices and rules, like, this is a craft that you study now, I think, more than ever. And I think that path of like, I just kind of got into it by the by is getting kind of harder and harder, for sure, especially when you're growing up in the Midwest and the companies aren't in your state. Of course, that's another element of it as well.
So I think the good way, if if there are people listening to this that are like, oh, what the heck, like I'm in so much debt or whatever, or like I have to go to school for this, like think of it as time saved.
Yes.
Right? Because it took me till I don't think I started my career till I was 27. And then I don't think I actually became probably a good level designer until
this is another thing we have in common. Like, I was also a late bloomer in the games industry. This is amazing, folks, learning so many things.
So I mean, if you're paying for time saved.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
I look at it that way. I mean, man, if I could be where I am now at like 27.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think about that all the time. I mean, life is life. I don't regret anything, but like, you know, for sure there's that. And so if you're a student listening to this, you have a great advantage. So on that warm, fuzzy note, we're just closing in on an hour. So let me just do this to kind of close things out. Gabe, let me just ask, do you have any final sort of bits of wisdom that you would give a young level designer starting out? Anything at all? Anything?
Absolutely. This is a pitfall of every designer, I think, ever, is ego. Like, that is the biggest problem for designers. You need to have an ego, but you need to check your ego at the door, because it will be a blocker in regards to being able to accept new ideas and influences from people that you can learn from. And you can learn from everyone. I'm saying everyone, from a grandma playing your game for the first time. Like, anyone can teach you everything. So just like, I had big problems with my ego at the beginning of my career, and let me tell you, dude, check that thing, because you will be so much better for it if you just like become a sponge and just take in everything from everyone. Additionally, I would say, make sure you're having fun doing your work, because that's gonna just make your life so much easier. When you start getting bogged down by other things, it's just gonna suck some of that like creativity from you and the fun, and you're gonna be miserable. So I would definitely say, like, you are designing for consumers and an audience, because ultimately that's what pays the bills. The most amount of people playing your game and spending money on it is what's going to, keep the lights on. But you're going to do your best work if you're feeling uninhibited and fun and free and all that stuff. So that's what I would say is very important. And plus, let me add that if you don't check your ego at the door, no one wants to work with you.
Right.
And that's
very
bad.
True. Yeah.
Our industry is so small, dude. Burn those bridges and you're never going to go to the job again.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. You would think of all the games being made and everything, but no, it is, everyone kind of knows each other, or they're like 1 or 2 degrees from knowing, someone else, right? Like, it's amazing.
Yes, because there's definitely been times when someone's like, hey, have you worked with this person before? We're interviewing them. And they're like, what do you think? I'm just like, oh.
And you don't want that. Oh gosh.
I've done it once or twice. I'm like, I just give like the shake of the head, and I feel bad about it, but that'll happen. So you need to I'd probably say ego's the biggest thing. Like, you need to be someone that everyone wants to work with.
Right. And that includes students that are listening, your classmates, because some of them, I hope all of them, will get jobs. And, you know, if they had a terrible time working with you at school, they'll burn you to the ground later on. So it starts now. It really does.
Yes. Correct.
So Kip Carbone, thank you for joining us halfway through. Really appreciate it.
Sorry, I
don't
came
be
in late
sorry.
to the game. It sounded great, but maybe it was better because I was not here.
The way to look at it is you were able to come in and drop some nuggets of wisdom to the artists listening to this. Do you have any final thoughts, Kip Carbone, for the audience today?
None.
Perfect.
I think. Yeah, like I can't think of anything offhand or clever. I do think sort of my new life goal, as I've said it, we were kind of, everybody's sort of saying the same thing, but I want people to be like, oh, that guy, Kip. I love that guy. I want to work with him. You know, like you want to be that person where it's like, despite whatever your skill set is, like they're just like, you want to be liked because it's better. It's better, I don't know,
health too, right?
Karmically anyway, too. Yeah. So karmically.
Right? If you're comical, that will also make you more enjoyable to work with.
I try to be comical, maybe too comical. Not comical.
Oh,
enough.
we had some good times, dude. We had some amazing times. Actually, I'll just say, as one little nugget for you know, apropos of nothing, that one of my favorite moments in my life was the Kip Carbone going away lunch. Because what ended up happening, and this is all I'll say, I won't say anything else, the waitress at that lunch, you know, we had a round for adults. We're not driving. It's cool. We all had a round, but the waitress screwed up and brought everyone double. It was a double round by mistake. And, you know, I'm actually...
Didn't we get 2 double rounds, I thought?
Yeah, it was something crazy. And I'm pretty lightweight, actually, like when it comes to that. I doesn't take me much, right? So I just mindlessly went boom, 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 boom. And I'll just say I'm really glad I didn't have to interview anyone that day. That's all. That's all I'm going to say about that.
I gave Conrad a piggyback ride.
Yes, in the streets of San Jose, and you just about died, right?
We wiped out. Yeah, we weren't driving, but we were running. Right. And I think Conrad got a terrible bruise, and I think I broke a rib.
What?
Yeah.
We are also I'll say, cheerful that we all just laughed, including you guys.
We're festive, yeah. We kind of laughed it off. Definitely, if we would have been sober and fell like that, I mean, that would have been like, I broke my pelvis or something.
Did you really break a rib?
For weeks afterwards, every time I take a deep breath, it would hurt, like, and then I would get like a really sharp pain in there. So I think it must have been
the dust
something.
Hard, man. I mean, they fell down hard.
We hit real hard. I was running full speed with Conrad on my back,
and
we were so top heavy. Then we just like whoa, and then
that would be frequent Grid Snaps podcast guest Conrad Honey, if people are wondering who we're talking about. Also
Conrad
Sledgehammer, Sledgehammer Games Conrad Honey. So, all right, hilarious story. Thank you for joining us, Gabe. Awesome stuff.
Thank you, Gabe.
Of course.
And so thank you for listening, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun digging deep into, honestly, an element of my craft that I'm always just a little insecure about because, you know, I always trained myself to get a multiplayer level design job, and it just never worked out. I always kept getting single player jobs, and so I always kind of like, do I really know what the heck I'm talking about? And the answer I got out of this is yes, and wow, I need to know more, right? Like, you kind of reinforce things I thought was true, but then you added things to them. So that's about the best of both worlds. I don't feel bad about myself, but I have more information to share with the students, and that's great, right? Because that's only going to help them. So, and anyone else listening.
I've got lots more.
All right, we'll have to have you back. We definitely will have to have you back. But until we do, folks, Kip, are you ready for our ending catchphrase?
I'm ready. I'm always ready.
All right, stay on the grid.
And keep well hid.